people leave having the microbiome of the soil, having their hands in the ground, but also kind of knowing each other a little bit more, which is quite sweet.
Welcome to Style Stories, brought to you by Easy Living Interiors, helping you transform your space and create the feeling of home. Hello, I'm Laura and welcome back to Style Stories with Easy Living Interiors. Today's episode is in celebration of Earth Day and I'm sitting down with Matt Smith from Hometree, our sustainability partner, to talk about the incredible work they're doing to restore nature in Ireland and why this partnership means so much to us. This conversation is full of those "wait, I didn't know that" moments, from the fact that Ireland actually has its own temperate rainforest to how even the smallest actions at home can make a real difference. It's inspiring, surprising and a really lovely listen, so let's get into it. Good morning, Matt, and welcome. How are you today?
Pretty good, yeah.
So for anyone who hasn't come across Hometree before, can you introduce yourself and what Hometree does?
Yeah, so my name's Matt Smith, just drove down from Milltown Malbay, West Clare, and I am the most senior person at a nature restoration organisation called Hometree. We've been going for 5 years and we focus on the environment, but we have a strong focus on woodlands, and within that kind of a particular type of woodland that's in Ireland, rainforests. You might have kind of heard of them. But we also do a lot of kind of engagement with people. We bring a lot of people on the journey. It's quite a complex thing we do, but in short, we're a nature organisation helping people connect with nature, but also do a lot of restoration work ourselves.
So you're a HQ in Ennistimon. So our team actually came and we did a site visit and we did a tour and we planted in your nursery, which was lovely. Yeah. So for listeners, what happens at your HQ and what goes on there?
They're really interesting days and do loads of group sessions with the public or with businesses. And with a business group like yourselves, you've got 10 to 20 people rocking up that some of them don't own a pair of wellies, some of them milked cows that morning at their farm. And so, it's quite a difficult thing to host when you've got, 30 people for one day, kind of mixed connection and attitude and sense of nature. So usually we do some kind of just teamwork, team bonding, nature connection, and then like the physical act of getting people's hands kind of in the soil. For me, it's quite normal to have my hands in the soil, but for a lot of people that, might be once or twice a year, it might be less, that they're actually going like, yes, this is here. So really that would be the main takeaway, that we help them kind of connect with nature just via a ton of different strategies, tree planting, seed collecting, removing the seeds from their kind of casing, planting them in the nursery, some invasive species removal, some tools, some education, some little workshops. And then we just try and have a nice lunch, and also people, connect with each other around nature. I mean, we exist because there is, not much nature in Ireland. So we exist to kind of speak to that. So kind of talking about that to people, but also hearing their stories around nature. And in that way, then they're connecting with each other and learning about each other through their own kind of natural experiences. So generally people leave kind of like having the microbiome of the soil, having their hands in the ground, but also kind of knowing each other a little bit more, which is quite sweet. Yeah, it was great having you guys there. You had a lot of fun. Yeah. I remember it was a nice day and a kind of mixed group. So,
And so talking about partnerships, because we have been a partner with Hometree since 2020. Yeah. So from your perspective, what kind of impact do the partners have, and what is the partner role in it all?
So like last year, let's say like 35% of our income was via these kind of partnerships, these SMEs, corporates, even like private donations. That's what gave us the ability to, we got maybe 40% from the state and then some from philanthropy. But it really helps us to kind of move that little bit faster, kind of land acquisition. It gets us to really be able to build out new programs and, use our intuition, which is based on years of experience, which I don't believe exists outside of it, because we're kind of confined in an organization. So if that wisdom becomes quite a lot, the more people you have there. And it really got us, I remember the first year we did a kind of schools program, a farmer program, and a tree planting, all kind of bundled into one. It was one of the first kind of bigger partnerships that we had. And then that year went really well, but we got to kind of stay connected to the team here. And then we worked with the tree planting and then the rainforest project. And what we've got to do with these partnerships is kind of launch stuff. Yep. Then the public or philanthropy or the state kind of get behind, and that it gives us that kind of a bit more agility or dynamism that we actually need to crack through, if that makes sense. So what I'd add to that is, one of the things that we always try and do is like, if you're going to be in a partnership, you have to come. We have to get you engaged in nature. And like, actually, when we get a group of, a business, like when you guys came, we get to get the money from the partnership, which delivers the impact. But then we get like 10, 20 or 30 people, usually clever, able-bodied, affluent people coming and like kind of paying to so we can pitch to them.
Yeah.
So we get this extra 30 people coming each time that we're going like, this is the problem. This is how it's complicated. This is what we need to make it change. And they're leaving like, they're not necessarily potential customers of ours, but they might go home and join a community garden or a nature group, or they might join, Birdwatch or the Irish Wildlife Trust, because that's what we need as a whole movement to be kind of mobilized. So that's what we see. And we did last year like 60 of these team or corporate or business days, and each of them had 30 smart people on a payroll. We had like the executive branches from banks and bigger, and we got like 30 of them ready to engage with us. So that is huge, to get people that hands in the soil, more connected to each other and thinking about nature. That's a massive opportunity for us.
How do you think people can kind of grow that connection to nature at home?
Like, you kind of nailed it, where you're like, I got a few houseplants and like the bees came in, I like totally cut you down. But that is a really good example, is like, being just observing, and you're like, I have a notion, I'm going to follow it, and then it happens. And I think it's great.
And I've been propagating I've been taking clippings and making other plants and crossbreeding. So
and I think, even if you're in an apartment, you can do these things. If you've got a bit more grass or a bit more land, like a tree in the garden is a fascinating experience. If you've got even if you've got a tiny garden, plant the trees or cut them down. After a few years, if they're too big or you don't like them, and, lob them in the bush. Like, it's a really fun watching trees grow, and if you could get a few different types, put them in the garden, put them in pots, a tiny bird bath or a pond, epic. Like, you'll see a bird will come down and land on your windowsill.
Watching the bird feeder is like an hour-long activity.
Yes. I don't think you need to have these kind of vast like swathes of land to get into nature. There is a community group really close by, but obviously we have tons of programs. I obviously want everyone to like go on and just like follow us on social media, donate to us right now.
Don't know what your opinion here is going to be, but I saw a guy on TikTok who took the tomato seed from a Burger King burger and he turned it into a tomato garden. This is real now. I can show you it. And I just thought that
humans are mad, aren't they? Yeah.
But so then your own background, what led you towards this career path? Like, did you ever have like a tree epiphany or a moment where you just felt your love for nature? Is it where you grew up?
Not so much. I think, ultimately as a species, we're kind of searching for meaning constantly, right? And often we have to like add meaning to what happened to us rather than, understand what's in store for us or what our life path is. But, as I've kind of looked back, my mum is a socialist. She taught kind of politics at university. She was quite a liberal person. My dad was a businessman in hospitality. We grew up in a restaurant on the beach. So I kind of grew up with these that, someone was day to day trying to find out how to kind of make a living through hospitality. And then my mum's master's was in like feminism in Iran as I was kind of growing up. So I had this kind of, questioning mindset in my life. But then I was just brought up in the 90s where, my mum read, The Guardian and The Observer, and it was just, nature. It was when we really started to understand that we were having a really big impact. It was outside the kind of hippie movement and the counterculture movements, and we really knew, every couple of weeks in the press there was some stuff around nature, and so that was the diet that I had. So I kind of studied that, and I think that's kind of what brought me here. We grew vegetables at home, and my friend had some land, and we used to kind of do some tree planting there as a kind of young teenager and stuff. And then I grew vegetables for like 8 years in my 20s, set up a farm in Clare as well. And it was kind of organically grown, regen grown. We had cows, pigs, sheep, chickens, turkeys, but loads of vegetables. And we had like 70 acres altogether. We did quite a bit of fundraising for it because it was a not-for-profit as well. And we planted a lot of trees on the land there. We created loads of woodlands, we created a big orchard. And we had this kind of pocket of land within a wide landscape that was being really well looked after. And it was really special, you know. A lot of people got involved, but we were only really having a decent impact on that 70 acres, and a really good one. And it was a model for other farmers. It was a place that people could come and learn about, you know, growing organic or regen food. But we weren't ever kind of overspilling. We might give our neighbors a hand if they wanted to. And that was at the kind of, say, 2010 to 20. And during that time, it was like when ESG started taking off. You know, there was corporate social responsibility, environmental social governance. Like we really were seeing that companies were like, hey, I want to, you know, rather than just giving, you know, a tiny bit of their profit to, you know, thirsty people in Africa or, you know, the homeless or something like that, they started giving it to nature. And we, at that time, Hometree, kind of set up in the winter of 2014 is actually with myself, Mitch Moncon McGann and Guy Fogel-Smith, who still runs the farm. We set Hometree up to kind of take those thoughts off the farm. So we started this kind of tree planting organization. And for 5 years, it was just, we'd get money from a business, €1,000, we'd buy 1,000 trees from a nursery and we'd go plant them somewhere, either on our not-for-profit farm or somewhere else. And that just started to develop, and I started wanting to spend more of my time doing that. And then in 2020, I stopped growing vegetables and just myself, Mitch and Moncon, we really like kind of got together and we were like, what does Hometree want to be?
So it's clearly evolved a lot, and it's now come from tree planting and it's grown. So the temperate rainforest and the Wild Atlantic Rainforest Project. That's really inspiring. And I've heard you speak about it on radio stations. And when I was doing my research, it was just really interesting to learn about the rainforest because I think a lot of people don't know that Ireland and Europe even has rainforests. So to a listener listening now, and they're like, no, I initially thought tropical, but it's not that.
No.
So can you explain what a temperate rainforest is?
I think what everyone does know is that it rains like crazy in the West. You know, like there's parts of Kerry that have kind of 3,200 mil of rain a year, and in Dublin they get like 500 or 600 mil of rain. They're completely different ecosystems. You know, there's a really dry corner of the country and a really wet kind of side of the country. And in that wet side, there's so much humidity in the air that, you know, plants can grow on the trunks and, you know, the branches of the trees. Plants growing upon plants growing upon plants is just kind of really a real green woodland. And in the east side, or the drier woodlands of most of Europe, there'd be, you know, you'd walk through a forest and you'd see the forest floor, which would hopefully have a lot of plants and, you know, understory, a lot of flora. And then you would see the canopy. And in between, there would be kind of brown branches. But in the West, we have this really green branches. It's thick and it's full of life. And they're kind of a relatively rare ecosystem. You know, there isn't many countries in the world that have them. You can imagine the temperate zone, you know, you've got the world and then you've got the equator and you've got the two tropics and they're the tropical regions, you know, and then above the tropics and below there's kind of this temperate area. Now it's not exclusive below the tropics, but there's kind of some parts of Canada, the US, Chile, Ireland, New Zealand, and then there's tiny little bits here and there, but it's pretty rare. There's kind of 6 or 7 countries in the world that this particular ecosystem is. So it's not that we only deal in the rainforest. It's more just like, isn't it cool that we've got them? And shouldn't we care about them? And I think I never love talking about Hometree. I love more talking about like, you know, the space of nature in Ireland and what's missing and what it could have.
And so what happened to these rainforests?
Like everything happened to them, you know, but really like when humans stopped being hunter-gatherers and became kind of pastoral or kind of farming people, it was kind of after we figured out how to get like metal from rock, you know, after we found out how to get like iron from iron ore, and we needed a lot of heat to remove the metal from the rock. Does that make sense? And once we did that, so the heat we used was wood. And then we had this new tool to cut down the trees to make more metal. And then once we cut down the trees, we're like, cool, we can grow grass or we can grow vegetables or we can have herbivores and we can, you know, start to have less kind of transient lifestyle and start to settle down. And we were 0% woodland cover. Now we're about 11 or 12%. Mostly it's commercial forests, the fast growing kind of conifers that you see to kind of it's an economy, it's sustainability, it's being able to build houses in Ireland with timber that's in Ireland. It makes a lot of sense. I would have done something really similar. And now there's a way bigger pivot towards nature, and we're just part of that pivot.
And so what's something about the Irish natural environment that would surprise people to hear? Something interesting that people wouldn't know?
Grass grows every day of the year.
Nice.
It doesn't grow every day of the year everywhere. That's, it's really good for herbivores. I think one of the most fascinating things I ever heard, and I might have my kind of facts wrong, like the West used to have quite a lot of nature in it until a particular type of sheep came from Asia, and that sheep could stay up in the uplands like all winter long. So you could just keep your sheep out the whole time. And when that happened, the West became kind of more valuable to kind of landlords, and they started being, I want more land because they could keep the sheep out longer. And that was kind of the final straw for nature, when the sheep could just stay up eating all the trees.
Something interesting I learned recently was that there is a lizard species in Ireland.
Oh, yeah.
One lizard species.
And
I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah. Up the lizards.
Yeah. And also I did learn the factual matter of the snakes in Ireland. It was the Ice Age. Was the reason the snakes aren't in Ireland anymore.
Yeah.
So I was St. Patrick. It was the Ice Age. So they were two interesting facts I learned.
Like since that is, when the ice melted, Ireland was isolated from mainland Europe a lot sooner than Britain was, for instance. So we have a lot less kind of natural diversity. We've got about 25 native trees, and England has about 150, just because it was connected to mainland Europe for a lot longer. Europe has about 500, America a few thousand, South America about 10,000. So they've got 10,000 native trees, we've got 25.
Yeah, it's not actually a huge amount.
My job's easy because I know them all. But if I was down there, I'd have, down there being in South America, I'd have a harder job.
Yeah,
for sure.
True. Oh yeah, so I heard you say nature is a web of life, which I really loved.
Yeah.
And so what does ecology mean to you? So in the way that like the birds, the bees, the insects, the trees, how it all interacts, and the humans, of course. So what is ecology to you?
I think probably what I said was, nature wants to become more and more complex, like if left to its own devices, so we have typically in the landscape these grassy fields, right, which are really important because they feed us, but nature are left to its own devices, and in those grassy fields we probably have like 10 to 15 grass species. See a grassy field and you're seeing about 15 different types of grass. Some grow faster, some grow slower, but that's really what's in a field. But like nature left to its own design wants to become way more diverse and complicated than that. There wants to be like bushes and shrubs and trees and, mosses and ferns, and life fully wants to be there, and it wants all of the different insects that are attracted to that type of habitat. Like on an oak tree, an oak forest or a few oak trees can support like 500 insects. A willow can support 80. A spruce can support about 20. And, I'm not sure about the grasses, but we're not in the hundreds, so nature wants to be kind of a lot more complicated than that.
And it's interesting. So this is like totally different.
Yeah.
But I've started in our apartment, we have like loads of houseplants now, and it's starting to get out of control. Yeah. But I had the window open the other day because the weather was nice and bees were coming in. Sweet. And I was like, I love this.
Yeah.
And like next project is a terrarium, because when you have a plant terrarium.
What's
like,
that? I don't know.
So basically say obviously if you had like a lizard and you did a terrarium for it, you would make its own little microclimate in there so that you're caring for it properly and whatnot. But you can actually just do a plant terrarium. So you can put all different kinds of plants like mosses, like the whole lot, trailing plants, whatever. So the next project is to kind of just plant a terrarium, and then like you put it, basically you can just take any piece of furniture like a chest and you just get your lighting and stuff. You can put water features in.
Sweet.
But it was nice just to see that a few weeks of just acquiring houseplants led to
a bit of nature.
Inside in our apartment.
One thing is, like speaking to that kind of like regenerating landscape versus a planted one, there is an argument for, say, rewilding at scale, but we've done a bit too much damage, I think, to let that happen. And out of the 25 trees that we have, a few of them, there's like 1 or 2 or 3 left in the wild, If we were waiting for rewilding to kick in, we'd be waiting a really long time, and we'd need to make sure that the kind of conditions for rewilding were really attended to, rather than just like removing some herbivore and hoping for the best. You know, the invasive species that are, you know, like kind of rhododendron and cherry laurel, they're really like, because of the conditions, the degraded nature of some of our habitats, these invasive species can actually survive in that set of conditions. So where, like, let's say ancient woodland, the deer that are kind of roaming around in some of these places, they love to eat baby trees and nothing eats it. So we'd have an island void of life.
Right.
So it's not like, remove the sheep and we'll have luscious hills. It's like, we need to be very, very careful. And that's why, you know, human interaction, human engagement, rural buy-in is critical, because we actually need a lot of people to add nature back to landscapes.
And a lot of your work as well is with farmers.
Exactly.
And so talk about, I suppose, the work that you're doing with the farming community.
Yeah, I think, you know, like practically speaking, there's a huge problem. You know, we don't have much nature in the wider landscape, and we're not going to be able to, let's say, buy our way out of this ecological problem. You know, in Scotland, you could go and buy 5 estates, totaling 100,000 acres. We do a lot of work with our neighbours at our sites, but also in the wider kind of landowning people, at helping them add trees or add nature to their farms. Finding a financing mechanism to unlock the capital that's needed to do it on scale kind of will be the challenge of the decade for us.
Right.
Yeah. Like, we have an ambition to do 60,000 acres. We think it's going to cost about 300 million, and 60,000 acres is still 0.3% of Ireland. So even if we are wildly successful and raise an astronomical amount of money, one that most people think is impossible, you wouldn't even see the difference we made on the landscape. It's, you know, they're frightening, you know, like odds, basically.
Yeah. But I've also heard you say many littles make a lot, or just something like that. Yeah. So I suppose as well, what's important about the work that you're doing is you're doing the work. So like 0.3%, let's say in the best case scenario at maximum efficiency in financial terms, is a tiny amount, but it's 0.2% more than we have right now.
I think, you know, I'm kind of tragically optimistic. Or kind of hopefully pessimistic, one of the two. And like, if you know, I also really just long for kind of meaning and purpose, and I think that everybody does. So, you know, just getting on with something is way more nourishing and feeds me. And you got to have a bit of hope. And you've also, you know, the wider ecological, like, let's say, landscape is pointing in the same direction as us. And what we've got now is an opportunity to do it with people in meaningful kind of way that's equitable. And there's, you know, the right money being deployed in the right way, which, in my opinion, is to the people that kind of currently own the land, rather than it being more kind of big state buyouts or corporate interest buying land because we need more nature or something like this. And, you know, if we do 0.3% and 10 more of us do 0.3%, which I think is totally possible, and the government do their 10%, and, you know, maybe, you know, like Quilter owns 7% of Ireland, you know, like they're a semi-state company that their remit's to produce forestry. Like, we're talking, it can add up quite fast. So, but as it stands, like today, it's never been worse.
Yeah.
You know, like,
and it can only get better when it's never been worse.
Yeah, you know, but I never want to ever like leave any situation like this, like pretending that we're in good shape. You know, it would be disrespectful to anyone listening, or yourselves, or even myself, and certainly nature, to kind of say that we're in a decent position. We're not. It's like frighteningly bad. So
you've built a really strong team of passionate people at Hometree from a wide array of different backgrounds. Sure. So who are the kinds of people that you have on your team, and what do they do? Really,
we got lucky, so lucky, because we were that kind of first, you know, like in, you know, I keep saying the UK because they're our closest neighbours, and I've also got experience there. But, you know, if we were trying to hire or recruit, we'd have a lot of competition, even in the not-for-profit nature landscape. But in Ireland, we don't have that big competition, especially if you want to be working in implementation, which is what we do. So we're not just in advocacy or lobbying or information, we're actually doing the work day to day. So I think 5 hires we've done in the last couple of years that I just mentioned, and they've been really good. Our first was a woman called Imelda Connolly. She was our most senior financial person until recently. She's actually leaving in a month. But she came from one of the bigger forestry companies. She was the CEO there.
Oh, okay.
And she moved from there to us as our kind of most senior financial person. And that was a really big move. You know, she took a pay cut to come work with us. About a year later, we got a woman called Marina Conway. She was the CEO of another huge forestry company. She's in her 40s and she was there for 20 years. She built a huge forestry company, but she's, I want to work in nature. I want to be building. So again, she would have taken I'd imagine a huge pay cut to come work with us, and she's our head of Woodlands. We got very recently a woman called Laura Costello. She worked for a big PR marketing company called Think House in Dublin. Then she came as our kind of chief comms officer. And then 2 other people that I think are really interesting. A guy called Liam Hennessy, a dairy farmer from Cork. He's running our nature financing mechanism. So he's like, nature organization hiring a dairy farmer? Like, what the hell? Like, you know, there's incongruence there. But he really is in the space. He gets it. And then a guy called Ronan Doherty, he built a wind farm business and he kind of sold it to Mitsubishi, and he works in our nature financing team as well. So these are just like the kind of more on the like leading edge of the organization. In a few more iterations of the nature space and island, these people, we wouldn't be able to hire them again. We just got in early and they were like, you know, scanning the landscape for where they could move next, and we were interesting. Hopefully in a few more years, we'll have tons of peers or competition and they'll be able to kind of pick and choose or something like this. You know, more kind of tragically maybe, you know, because, you know, all of those jobs I just outlined, most of them took a pay cut to come work with us. So that means like, in theory, and it's similar in the not-for-profit space kind of worldwide, in theory, we can only really take people that can afford to come and like follow their heart or, you know, follow their values. And I really want that to not be the only way. Yeah. I really want to be able to hire people that are, you know, from a different socioeconomic class or something like this, where they're just like, I'm really good. Yeah. I'm excellent. And I want to be able to compete with the corporates for like to recruit instead. But that means, you know, the whole NGO landscape needs to change. I mean, the Wheel do an amazing thing. They kind of say that if your organization is, you know, this many staff, this much turnover, this is where you should be paying your staff. And, you know, we're only 5 years old, so we're not quite, you know, we're not pushing the bar there, but one day we really would like to push the bar. Not because I want to necessarily like, you know, be paying over the odds, but I want to be getting over the odds. It's, you know, and that's, I suppose, my job in kind of making sure that the future is good for the organization. And because we run a lot of different programs, we're like super multidisciplinary. You know, we both like collect seeds, grow them, plant them, find the financing mechanism for them, design the ecosystem, do the comms package, take schools, corporates, elderly people, run events. So we've got a lot of different programs running, and sometimes it can get messy. Yeah. Because we'll be kind of merging 2 programs and they're like, what's going on around here? And at the same time as, you know, the organization's growing. So having a kind of internal business structure, like an org structure that makes it easy for people to dip in and out, that was a bit of a grind at the start, but we cracked it last year and it feels really good. Woohoo! Yeah. Celebrate those wins. Yeah, it was a huge one.
And so you spend a lot of time talking to people who live and work on the land, and you do, is it deep mapping? History mapping?
Yeah.
What's the real term?
What is it? The deep mapping process is, we're really like putting our mark on a landscape, and, you know, our neighbours, it's very new. Like their neighbours up for the last few hundred years would have done a particular activity on that land, which was the same as what they did. So if we're up in the hills, we would be a sheep farm, they would be a sheep farm. If we were kind of down in more the lowlands, we'd be a suckler farm, they'd be a suckler farm. Or if it was really nice dry land, we'd be a dairy farm. You know, so we're there going, we're something completely different. And that I suppose interaction needs to be held carefully, right? And so one of the things, you know, we have a whole kind of matrix of things that we'd like to do, but ultimately it's just to speak to this respect and care for people that we're working near. And when I first started growing vegetables, actually the first project we had was a community garden, and it was 1/3 of an acre gifted to us by a hotel in Lahinch. And one of our first days that we were there, one of the kind of old lads drove past in his tractor, and he literally shook his head at us, And then a few weeks later, we were still there every day, like working hard to clear the land, to plant apple trees. And we built an underground glass house, and not underground, but it was dug into the ground for the extra kind of geothermal heat to keep some plants growing. But after a few weeks, like the same guy kind of, he didn't shake his head. He kind of drove past slowly and had a little
Now
look.
he's inquisitive.
Yeah, but a few months later, he's given us a hand. And then a few years after that, which is where we bought the first vegetable farm, he came to our house and was like, that land's going for sale, you guys should buy it. And that is like the perfect example of how these different groups should be welcomed into a landscape. And I put it down to just like, we were just working every day. They couldn't believe that we were like, had the shovel in our hands longer than they did for the day. And it really meant something. And I'm like still friends with my neighbors, to this day. And, I was cycling home yesterday, dropped my car to the garage, and this same guy, he drove past in his tractor, and I just held on up the big hill and we were just chatting. And that is how we would love that, this transition went, which was just like kind of hand in hand with the people whose land we're looking, 60,000 acres is a lot of land, and we want to own as little of it as possible. But we do believe that being active and being a stakeholder in that landscape is really important, so saying what we want you to do, we're willing to do ourselves. What we want you to do, we have experience and expertise in, and what affects us will affect you, and what affects you will affect us. And that, I believe, is the sweetest way to go. There's an Australian engineer, a guy called Pierre Yeomans. He kind of talks about the landscape in this really interesting matrix.
So for Earth Day, the theme this year is Our Power, Our Planet. What does that mean to you? What's your take? Hot take?
It's really hard, isn't it? Because I don't want to ever guess where anyone's at, or suggest that they should or shouldn't do something, because I've got no idea where everyone's at. What I do know is if we had 500,000 followers on Instagram, or in our mailing list, if we had 5 million, or if we had 300 million euros in the bank, we could do 60,000 acres, we could lobby the government, and we could advocate really a lot for the future that we want to see. So like, that is like power for us is kind of leverage and money, and if without those things, we don't really have any power. Obviously, we've got like agency about how we feel about our reactions to stuff, which is like, sometimes I don't buy into, but like, we do have power internally to deal with the external world, but we also have power like practically with, where we give our attention to. But, definitely we need money. We need a lot of it. Last year we earned 2 million. We actually need 300 to do 60,000 acres, and that will still be 0.3% of Ireland. We need a lot of money, and what we really need is 5 million people to give us quite a lot of money. Yeah. It's a huge thing. And I am also not in any way underestimating the kind of the odds that are against people, and, how tight the cost of living is, and I'm not expecting it, but and at the same time, we do spend a lot of money on other stuff. We do these kind of lots of talks with students, and we're like, give us a £5.
Yeah.
It will make you feel better, but it will actually have a big impact, so we have these different membership packages. So I also, at the same time as saying I understand the cost of living, I'm also going but what about nature?
Yeah.
Can it not have something, and to a local community group, or even spend a £5 on a tree and plant it in your garden, it's a piece of cake. You could, right now, you could just stop listening to me rattle on, drive to a garden centre, buy a tree, put it in the ground, and you're going to have a really nice time. And I promise within a week, a bird will land on it that couldn't have landed there before, and that is epic. Yeah.
And donate. We'll have a donation button
something
in the show
in
notes.
that, yeah. I mean, if we could just have all your followers, that would be great, and powerful. But people are just slow to kind of get over there and press that button, you know. But it does give us...
We'll do a race to the button.
Yeah,
Who can
exactly.
get to the button first?
Yeah. A giveaway. You get a whole sofa and chairs.
Precisely. And so finally, if listeners were to take one small action this week, what would you love for it to be?
I think if you could just go get yourself a sapling, you know, there's 25 to choose from. You know, juniper is a tiny bush that just will grow over a rock or in the corner of your garden. Go buy a sapling from a garden centre and plant it somewhere that you know. I'd actually buy 2 or 3 just in case 1 or 2 die, because they do that.
Okay, so quick fire round. What are you watching on TV at the moment? Or films? What film have you watched recently?
I really liked Industry. Did you watch Industry? It's so edgy.
Favourite song at the moment?
Jerry Wolf's Cork Road.
A hidden gem in Ireland that people might not know about?
Milltown Malbay.
Nice.
Yeah.
One book you'd recommend to everyone?
I think one book, How Much Land Does a Man Need by Leo Tolstoy.
If you could spend a perfect day outdoors anywhere, where would it be?
On the beach.
Love. Well, Matt, thank you so much. And that's it. You are now released. That's all for today's episode of Style Stories with Easy Living Interiors. A big thank you to Matt from Hometree for joining us. And as always, thank you so much for listening. As this episode is in celebration of Earth Day, if you'd like to support the incredible work Hometree are doing, you can find more information on how to donate in the episode description below. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow and share, and we'll be back with more very soon. Thank you for joining us on Style Stories with Easy Living Interiors. You can hear all the news, including links to more information, in the description area of this podcast. Please share our show with a friend who might enjoy it. Simply search Style Stories with Easy Living Interiors on Apple, Spotify or YouTube. This podcast is produced by justpod.io for Easy Living Interiors.